My name is Lila Monroe, and my husband built our marriage on air. We called it Modern Marriage, a podcast about honesty and emotional transparency, recorded every Tuesday in a rented studio off Congress Avenue. Listeners believed every word we said, every breath we took together, every promise we rehearsed until it sounded like love. I thought our show was a mirror of us until the reflection started talking back. It happened on our anniversary episode. Evan was in the studio, leaning into the mic, preaching about trust, while Veronica Lane, the woman he swore was just a consultant, slid into the empty chair beside him. She adjusted his collar, smiled for the camera, and said, "Marriage is about knowing when to let someone else speak for you." The audience laughed. I didn't. Something inside me froze between the applause and the static of the headphones I was wearing. After the show, I found him still basking in the lights. His voice casual when I said, "You invited her on our anniversary episode?" He didn't flinch. "She's a professional. Lila, you should thank her for saving our brand." He walked away before I could answer, leaving the words hanging like feedback in an empty room. I remember thinking, if honesty was our product, he'd just sold the last of it. Later that night, I checked the shared account for production expenses. A transfer labeled V-Lane Media Consulting blinked at me $45,000. It wasn't a mistake. It was a signature. His. Hers. Theirs. That was the moment I realized the betrayal wasn't private. It was public. Monetized. Broadcast to anyone willing to listen. Veronica moved through the industry like she still owned it. And Evan followed her as if gravity had changed direction. She took him to panels, interviews, and rooftop mixers where she whispered, "You're not a host, Evan. You're a movement." He laughed like a man reborn, and I watched him forget who built the foundation he was standing on. When she called him the next big voice in emotional media, he believed her as easily as he once believed in us. I saw the emails first. Her subject lines were all strategy, rebranding, new ownership draft, next phase. His replies sounded rehearsed, careful, almost afraid. One night, I opened a message that said, "Once the rebranding is done, Lila will have no claim." His answer came fast. "Don't worry. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." The next morning I told him what I'd found, my voice steady enough to make him flinch. He smiled, not in guilt but in triumph. "You're letting her control everything you built with me." I said. "No," he answered, leaning back like a preacher with a new sermon. "She's teaching me what partnership really means." I didn't respond because I realized the lesson wasn't about love, it was about leverage. Veronica kept her tone soft when she spoke to me. Pretending mentorship. "You're so talented, Lila, but you hold yourself back," she said once over coffee she didn't drink. "People want stories that hurt a little." I smiled and told her, "Be careful what you wish for. Pain has good memory." Her eyes flickered. Then she changed the subject to sponsorships and growth charts, as if betrayal could be managed like marketing. That week, our show's banners changed. The tagline, rewritten to sound bolder. "Cleaner. Less arse," Evan said. "She's updating the brand to match our audience." I said, "She's deleting your conscience to match hers." He didn't answer. I didn't push. Some truths deserve their own silence, the kind that waits until it becomes a weapon. Evan began locking me out in quiet ways that didn't look cruel on paper. The passwords changed. The analytics disappeared. And the shared drive was suddenly under maintenance. When I asked, he said, "You've been stressed. Lila, you need rest." I told him I needed access, not therapy. And he replied, "Then trust me to handle it." Trust was what he wanted most blind, obedient, and easy to overwrite. Veronica started coming to the house more often, her perfume arriving before her voice. She brought files and called it mentorship. Settling into my chair like it already belonged to her. One afternoon, she said, "You should rest. Lila, you've done your part. Let Evan grow." I smiled and answered, "Grow into what? Your next PR stunt?" She laughed, slow and polished. The sound of a woman who had already written the ending. Evan's attention came in rations. He spoke to me through emails even when we sat in the same room. Forwarding documents I wasn't meant to question. When I asked about the merger paperwork, he said, "It's standard procedure." I asked, "For what?" And he looked up just long enough to say, "For us to move forward." He didn't mean marriage. He meant ownership. He just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. Diane called that night, her voice low and sharp. "If she owns your content, she owns your voice," she warned. I asked her how to fight something built on lies dressed as business. And she said, "You don't fight lies. You document them." Her words stayed in my head longer than sleep did. I realized isolation wasn't the punishment, it was the setup. They needed me quiet long enough to sign away everything that still had my name on it. Marcus was the only person I trusted enough to ask for help. And even then I didn't use words like betrayal or theft. I just said, "Some files disappeared. Can you recover them?" He nodded without asking questions. The kind of loyalty that doesn't need details. 2 nights later, he sent a message that read, "You should listen to this somewhere private." The audio started with Veronica's voice, low and deliberate. The next phase is what we call media therapy. We guide the guests, then push them until they break. The rawer the pain, the higher the engagement. Evan laughed in the background and said, "She thinks honesty sells. But humiliation gets numbers." I sat there, headphones pressing the truth against my skull. Realizing our show was never about healing, it was about harvesting. When I confronted Evan, he didn't deny it. He explained it like a business plan. People need drama. Lila, they want to feel something even if it's ugly, he said, pacing like he was lecturing a crowd. I told him, "You built an empire on confession. And now you're surprised it sounds like guilt." He shrugged and said, "The audience loves redemption arcs. Yours will be next." 1. That night I replayed the recording until every laugh sounded like proof. The lines blurred between work and cruelty, between ambition and deceit, until even his silence felt rehearsed. Marcus asked if I wanted him to delete the copies, and I told him, "No. Save everything." I didn't know what I would do yet. Only that the files were no longer just recordings, they were leverage. When I turned off the lights, the studio still hummed with leftover sound. A ghost of every lie we'd told into that microphone. I whispered to the dark. That night, I stopped being his partner. I became his ghost producer and his reckoning. The air felt heavy but clean. Like truth finally exhaled after years of being trapped. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was correction. And I had just found the proof to begin it. Diane came over with her laptop and the calm expression she used in courtrooms. She listened to the recordings without interrupting. Then said, "This isn't gossip, Lila. It's evidence of manipulation and fraud." I told her I didn't want a lawsuit. I wanted exposure. She nodded once and replied, "Then we'll do both legally and publicly." Together we mapped every file, every signature, every false line that tied Evan and Veronica together. Marcus joined us later, carrying the hard drive like it was a confession waiting to happen. He said, "You want me to pull their backups too?" I answered, "Everything they think they erased." His fingers moved fast, restoring the archives and adding timestamps. Diane looked at me over the screen and said, If this goes wrong, you'll be accused of invasion, I told her. If it goes right, they'll be accused of everything else. Dime. We decided on precision, not chaos. The plan was simple. Gather all proof of the media therapy deception, then let the truth speak in their own voices. Diane filed a protective claim for intellectual property, giving me legal grounds to use the recordings. Marcus synced the files to a timer connected to our old broadcast system. At the right moment, it plays itself, he said. I asked him how long it would take. 3 days, he replied. But once it starts, no one can stop it. When I met with Jenna at the cafe near the station, I told her what I had. She leaned in and said, "If I publish this, it'll explode." "You sure you want that kind of fire?" I said. "I'm done being the kindling." She smiled and replied, "Then give me a spark." I handed her a single clip labeled Session 0. She played it once, jaw tightening at Evan's laugh. By the time I got home, my nerves had settled into purpose. Diane texted, "It's all ready. You just need to decide when." I looked at the clock and said to no one. The next live episode. It felt poetic to let the truth travel the same road as the lies. The files were set, the trigger scheduled, and for the first time in months, silence didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like countdown. The episode was called Love After Truth, and Evan wanted it to sound redemptive. Veronica sat beside him, her tone dripping warmth as she said, "We're here to talk about rebuilding after betrayal." I listened from the control room, my fingers tracing the keyboard like a pulse. Evan smiled into the camera and said, "Transparency isn't about confession. It's about control." I pressed one key, and the system took over. The first clip rolled over his voice, seamless and sharp. It was his own words from the deleted session. "She thinks honesty sells, but humiliation gets numbers." His eyes widened, confusion bleeding into fear. Veronica tried to laugh it off. "Old test footage," she said. Forcing a grin, he whispered, "Cut the feed." She shook her head and hissed, "I can't. It's live." The next segment played. Evan's voice again. Colder now. "Once the rebranding is done, Lila will have no claim." The audience count climbed past 70,000 as comments flashed across the screen. He turned toward the control room and shouted, "Lila, what did you do?" I stepped out into the studio, calm as if walking through static. "You always said the mic never lies," I said. "I just made sure everyone heard it." "One." Veronica stood, her composure cracking at the edges. "You can't just sabotage us. This is defamation," I answered. "You can't defame a man with his own words." She glared at Evan. "You promised this was handled," he muttered. "You told me it was safe." Their alliance broke faster than the broadcast delay could catch. I looked at Evan, his voice trembling now. "You built this platform on trust." I said, "Consider this the audit." He stammered. "Lila, we can fix this. Please." I leaned closer. "You can't fix truth. It's not broken. It's just recorded." Veronica grabbed his arm, whispering, "Shut it down." He pulled away and said, "You shut it down. You started it." The screen split between their faces and the evidence still rolling emails, invoices, signatures. Diane's legal watermark appeared on the feed, sealing every frame as admissible evidence. Veronica turned pale. "You just ended his career," she said. I smiled slightly. "No. Veronica, I just ended yours again," Evan whispered. "You planned this?" I said. "No. Evan, You taught me how. Jost. Security entered. Summoned by chaos they didn't understand. Evan begged the crew to stop recording. But none of them moved. Every phone in the room was filming. He looked small for the first time. Not as a host or a man betrayed, but as the architect of his own undoing. I walked out while the audio still looped his voice, saying, "Transparency isn't about confession. It's about control." The line kept playing long after I was gone. And for once, he was right. By morning, the clip had been downloaded 1,000 times, mirrored across every platform that once ignored us. Evan lost every sponsor within 24 hours, and Veronica's firm issued a statement denying responsibility. Diane called to say, "They're both under investigation for media fraud and contractual deception." I asked, "So it's over?" She paused before answering. "For them. Yes. For you. It's just clean air now." So. Jenna's article went live the same day. Its headline sharp enough to sting. "How a woman used the truth to break a media empire." She quoted me saying, "Transparency only hurts the people who hide." I didn't remember saying it, but it sounded like something I would have whispered after the cameras stopped. Marcus sent a short message, "The files are safe." "You're safe," I replied. "Keep them anyway. Some truths deserve archives." The studio emptied itself of their ghosts. Equipment was removed. Signage peeled away. And for the first time, the silence felt earned. Evan tried calling once, leaving a message that began, "We could rebuild," but ended in static. I deleted it without listening further. I met Diane that evening and signed the final ownership transfer, reclaiming what I had built. She said, "What will you do with it now?" I told her. "Rebuild, but quieter." 2 weeks later, I launched a new podcast called The Quiet Exit. Its intro was 1 sentence long. "Sometimes leaving is the loudest thing you can do." Listeners came back not for scandal, but for stillness. I didn't chase numbers anymore. I let the truth measure its own audience. And when the first episode aired, I sat in the dark, breathing in silence that finally belonged to me. The studio is quiet again, the air holding only the soft hum of memory. I sit where it all began, the mic standing like a witness instead of a weapon. Its red light flickers once before settling into calm, as if it knows we've said enough. I whisper, "It used to be his weapon. Now it's my witness." It's not. Outside, the city moves without knowing how many stories end in silence. I don't crave applause anymore. I crave the absence of noise that once called itself love. The truth no longer hurts, it breathes. Slow and steady, filling the space he tried to occupy. Truth doesn't need applause, I say quietly. It just needs to be heard once. When the light fades, I leave the mic where it is. The silence that follows doesn't echo him. It belongs to me. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe truth carries its own quiet power, share this moment with someone who needs to hear it. Every voice has its silence, and every silence deserves to be understood. I'll see you in the next story, where honesty still breathes.